You know, in my Real Strength Now training, I often go back to the old masters to find out what they had to say about exercise, but particularly what they had to say about breathing. Today I'm going to talk about Angelo Siciliano. You may not have heard of him, but most of us my age really have. Angelo Siciliano was born in 1892, and he was the 97-pound weakling who had sand kicked in his face on the beach, otherwise known as Charles Atlas, who trademarked the name dynamic tension, which is another name for something that I teach called dynamic resistance. There's really nothing new under the sun. Charles Atlas took that name because of a statue in Coney Island, New York. A friend of his said, "You look like that statue of Atlas." So Siciliano became Charles Atlas. He lived to be 80 years old. Now, often when I'm talking about these old masters, George Hackerschmidt, Charles Atlas, I think, well, he only lived to be 80 or 89, and we all want to go to 100 these days, or 95 or whatever. Well, you have to understand that in those days, in the 1800s, the life expectancy for a guy like me was 50 to 55 years old. So these people were outliving that life expectancy by 20, 25 years. How did they do it? Well, Atlas, one of his mottos was, live clean, think clean, and don't go to burlesque shows. That was just one. But his dynamic tension, I've studied it. Dynamic tension included a lot of stuff that has come to me over the years, that has come organically to me through martial arts and boxing, yoga, Pilates, whatever I've studied. One thing was visualization. Visualization. What did he do for the chest muscles? One of his exercises was put your hands out and pretend you're holding onto a rope. Tense all your muscles. Think of the rope. Pull the rope down. Now there it comes. You're pulling a rope. Well, what's he doing? He's visualizing. Now take the rope back up. All the time tensing the muscles. Well, you see, this is an exercise in dynamic or static resistance. There's the static. Here's the dynamic. Moving with a contraction, and that's dynamic tension. And he had loads of exercises to do it. But what gets me, and it gets me with all these fellows, is when I read about, well, what did they say about breathing? Because in all my training, no matter what it was, whether it was boxing or karate, it was always the breath. Calm the mind with the breath. Keep the body flowing with energy. Use the breath. So what did Charles Atlas have to say about the breath? And I'm going to read this so I don't miss a word, because I think it's wonderful. In his very first lesson, pure air, deep breathing, the very first thing in securing radiant health is the deep breathing of pure air. We can live without food for many weeks, without water for many days, but we cannot live without air for more than a few minutes. Air is equally a food as fruit and vegetables. As it enters into the composition of the body, its value cannot be overemphasized. Yet because it is so cheap, we ignore the real value. The first step required is to practice daily, full, deep, lower breathing. There are some teachers who advocate blowing out the upper chest to an enormous extent. But this is both useless and injurious, because as you get older, you neglect the deep breathing, with the result that the cavities of the lungs are unused, and this forms a suitable culture medium for lung troubles and disease. What I advocate is formal, deep breathing so that all parts of the lungs are filled to the utmost in proportion to the size of the body without straining. Oxygen is life. That's from Charles Atlas, and that's the first lesson, or one of the things in the first lesson of his course. What's he talking about? He's talking about vital capacity. What's vital capacity? Well, it's actually the amount of air you can exhale in one big exhalation after a deep inhale. However, vital capacity is the elasticity of our lungs, the way the rib cage stays young and enlarges, the intercostal muscles. It's vital capacity. What else is he talking about? Diaphragmatic breath. He doesn't use the word diaphragm. He goes lower breathing. If you're breathing with your belly, you're using your diaphragm. You're keeping this mechanism young. So maybe when we look at these old masters, you go, well, Charles Atlas lived to be 80 years old. You think of, and everybody else lived to be about 52 or 54. He was born in 1892. So he had to be doing something right. Think clean, live clean, don't go to burlesque shows.